Okay, so imagine like a sleeping giant, just like brimming with potential, ready to totally reshape the landscape.
Hmm.
That's kind of what we're diving into today,
Okay.
the world of Indigenous businesses in Australia.
Oh,
We've got this super fascinating article by Sarah Hudson.
okay.
She's an Indigenous affairs researcher.
Right.
And we're going to use this deep dive to really understand, why this sector matters,
Yeah.
what makes it unique, and how it's like changing the game for everyone.
I think it's a really important shift away from that, like, closing the gap narrative we hear so much.
Right.
Instead of just focusing on the challenges,
Yeah.
we're going to explore all the incredible successes and the, like, faces that are driving them.
I love that. Okay, so about this sleeping giant thing,
Hmm.
the article mentions that the number of Indigenous businesses has actually tripled
Wow.
in the last 20 years.
That's huge.
That's huge. Yeah, and it seems like a lot of folks are still totally missing this story.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because this growth is happening despite a lot of, negative perceptions out there.
Hmm.
The media tends to like focus on the struggles,
Right.
but there's this whole other side
Right.
with successful ventures like what was that one? The Gumachi Clan Corporation, for example.
Oh, yeah, they're running a timber and construction business, right?
Yes.
And not in some, like, easy urban environment.
Right.
This is out in remote Arnhem Land.
Exactly. And the article highlights some research showing that Indigenous business owners in those like really remote areas can actually out-earn their non-Indigenous counterparts.
Wow.
Which is pretty amazing.
That's a powerful counter-narrative. It really flips the script.
Totally.
And it makes you think, what else are we missing? Like,
Okay.
it's more than just closing the gap.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing, like, a whole new landscape of success.
Even the Prime Minister has spoken about the need for more hope and optimism in Indigenous policy,
Yeah.
particularly, by backing these enterprises. Right.
And there's a very practical reason for that.
Okay.
Indigenous businesses are way more likely to hire Indigenous people,
Right.
which creates this ripple effect
Oh,
of
yeah.
economic independence and,
Yeah.
you know.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're seeing this rise of Indigenous businesses.
Right.
But the article points out that we can't just like lump everyone together. It debunks this myth
Yeah.
that all Indigenous Australians are one big homogenous group.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The 2011 census data breaks it down pretty well.
Okay.
You have about 65%
Okay.
who are working, thriving, living lives comparable to other Australians.
Got it.
Then there's a group of about 22%
Okay.
who are welfare dependent,
Mm-hmm.
facing similar struggles as
Yeah.
other Australians, in similar situations.
Right.
But then there's this crucial 13%
Okay.
who are living on Indigenous land, dealing with way more limited opportunities
Right.
and facing the most significant disadvantage.
So tailoring solutions is key then.
Because what works for one group might not be effective for another.
Exactly.
It's about recognizing the diversity within these communities.
It's about moving away from those like blanket policies and creating much more targeted solutions
Right.
that address the specific needs of those who need it most.
Which actually leads to a question that honestly kind of surprised me. What actually defines an Indigenous business?
Right.
I thought it was pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But the article dives into some of the nuances.
Yeah, some people define it just by ownership,
Okay.
like 51% or even 50% Indigenous ownership.
Mm-hmm.
But then that raises all sorts of questions
Yeah.
about partnerships.
Yeah.
Like, what about a husband and wife
Yeah.
where one is Indigenous and one isn't?
Right.
Does that qualify?
Or even family businesses where ownership gets split up in all these different ways.
Exactly. It gets complicated fast. And
Yeah.
then you have like another layer. Some folks argue that a true Indigenous business is defined by how it contributes to the community.
Okay. Interesting.
So does it employ Indigenous people?
All right.
Does it provide financial support back to the community?
So this brings up a really interesting point about
Yeah.
how we even measure success
Exactly.
in this context.
Because it's clearly not just about profits, right?
Right.
There's this whole social impact piece that's hard to quantify,
Yeah.
but it's incredibly important.
Exactly. And the article introduces this concept
Yeah.
called social return on investment,
Oh, yeah.
or SROI.
SROI.
It's trying to like measure that broader benefit
Right.
a business brings to society as a whole.
Exactly.
Can you give us an example of that in action?
Yeah. The article mentions BNYM Indigenous Designs.
Okay.
It's a small pottery and ceramics family business. Their SROI ratio is way higher than average,
Interesting.
suggesting that smaller, culturally focused businesses
Yeah.
can have a huge positive impact, even if they're not pulling in like massive profits.
Which makes sense,
Yeah.
right? If you're employing locally sourcing materials responsibly,
Yeah.
and reinvesting in the community.
Right.
That value goes way beyond your bottom line.
Absolutely.
But I imagine that adds a whole other layer of pressure for these business owners.
Oh, for sure. There's this tension between financial success
Yeah.
and community benefit.
Right.
And then you layer on things like requests for family loans.
Right.
It's a lot to navigate.
It really makes you realize that supporting these businesses takes more than just good intentions.
Absolutely.
We need to understand, like, the systems they're operating within.
For sure.
The article mentions government programs,
Yeah.
private sector initiatives.
Right.
I'm really curious to unpack those a bit more.
Yeah, there's a whole web of support out there, but navigating it can be tricky.
Yeah.
We need to look at what actually works, what's missing,
Right.
and where good intentions might be falling short.
Okay. Let's dive into that.
Yeah, sounds good.
So we've got this, complex landscape of indigenous businesses. And I'm starting to see how important it is to really get, like, that cultural context.
Yeah.
It's not a one-size-fits-all approach, right?
Absolutely not. Policymakers and potential partners need to remember that the indigenous business sector
Right.
is as diverse as the communities themselves. I mean, it's like comparing a tech startup to a family-run bakery.
Right.
Their needs and approaches are completely different.
That's a great analogy. Okay, so let's dive into that cultural context a little bit more.
Sure.
What are some of the key factors that shape how indigenous businesses operate?
Well, one of the most important is that emphasis on community and collective benefit.
Yeah.
It's not just about individual success.
Right.
It's about how that business can uplift the whole entire community.
It's that idea of reciprocity that we often hear about, right?
Exactly.
Where success is shared and everyone has a responsibility to contribute.
Yeah, and that can sometimes clash with the more, individualistic, profit-driven approach that dominates a lot of Western business practices. It's not that those values are inherently incompatible. It's more about finding ways to bridge those worldviews and create partnerships that are both economically viable and culturally respectful.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where everyone benefits.
Exactly.
But how do non-indigenous partners approach that in a way that feels genuine and not exploitative?
It starts with learning and adapting. Non-indigenous partners need to check their assumptions at the door and recognize that there are different ways of measuring success and different ways of doing business.
And the article emphasizes this idea of skin in the game.
Yes.
I was struck by that phrase too. What does it actually mean in practice? Because it seems like it goes beyond just, writing a check or offering some pro bono help.
It's about making a genuine commitment to the success of that indigenous business.
Right.
Investing both financially and intellectually, sharing the risks and rewards, and working collaboratively towards a shared vision.
So it's about being a true partner, not just a benefactor.
Exactly.
Which probably means giving up some control
Yeah.
and trusting the expertise of the indigenous partners.
That's right. And that can be a challenge for some,
Right.
especially those coming from a corporate world that prioritizes control and efficiency.
Right.
It requires a shift in mindset
Yeah.
and a willingness to embrace a different way of operating.
The article mentions black cladding as a potential concern.
Right.
Can you explain what that is and why it's so harmful?
Yeah. So imagine a business falsely claiming to be indigenous owned
Okay.
just to snag government contracts
Right.
or other benefits that are meant to support genuine indigenous businesses. That's black cladding.
So it's basically fraud.
It is, and it undermines the whole system.
It also feeds into this harmful stereotype
Yeah.
that indigenous businesses need special treatment to compete,
Right.
which just isn't true.
Exactly. We need safeguards in place to prevent that
Yep.
and ensure that the benefits are going to those who are genuinely entitled to them. That means both government agencies and private sector partners
Right.
need to be doing their due diligence.
So it's about verifying ownership, understanding the business's operations, and making sure there's real indigenous involvement
Yeah.
in decision-making and profit sharing.
Exactly.
But that due diligence should be done with respect, not suspicion. Right?
Yeah.
It's about ensuring fairness and transparency,
Right.
not creating unnecessary roadblocks.
It's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
Open communication and a commitment to building trust are essential.
The article also talks about how government-run businesses
Right.
can sometimes end up competing with
Yeah.
private indigenous businesses, and that just doesn't seem fair.
No, it doesn't. The example they give is the NSW, National Parks and Wildlife Service.
Okay.
They set up their own Aboriginal tour business with the intention of creating jobs.
Okay.
But it actually ended up hurting the existing Indigenous-owned tour companies in the area.
Because they couldn't compete with the lower prices
Right.
of a government-subsidized business.
Exactly.
Makes you wonder how many other examples are out there.
Yeah, and it highlights a broader issue, which is the potential for government programs to unintentionally crowd out private sector initiatives.
Yeah.
We need to be mindful of those unintended consequences and ensure that government support isn't creating unfair competition.
So it's about finding that balance between government support and private sector involvement.
Exactly.
And recognizing that what works in one context might not work in another.
There's no one-size-fits-all solution. It requires a nuanced understanding of the specific needs and challenges of different sectors and regions.
The article also talks about investing in human capital as a way to support Indigenous business development. What exactly does that involve?
It's about providing the resources and opportunities for Indigenous individuals to gain the skills and knowledge they need to succeed in business. So investing in education training and mentorship programs.
So it's not just about giving money to businesses. It's about empowering individuals to become entrepreneurs and leaders.
It's about fostering a culture of entrepreneurship within Indigenous communities and creating a pipeline of talent.
And that creates a ripple effect, right? As more Indigenous people gain the skills and confidence to start their own businesses, it leads to greater economic empowerment and community development.
It's about breaking down those systemic barriers that have historically limited Indigenous participation in the economy.
The article also highlights the need for regulatory reform, especially when it comes to land use in remote communities.
Yes.
Can you explain why that's so important?
Well, many Indigenous communities have significant land assets. They're land-rich, but outdated regulations and bureaucratic hurdles make it really difficult for them to use that land for economic development.
So they have this like untapped potential, but they're stuck because of these outdated rules.
Exactly. Streamlining those processes, clarifying land tenure rights, and creating more flexible land use policies could unlock so much economic opportunity.
It's about giving Indigenous communities more autonomy and control over their own resources.
Exactly.
Which is a crucial step towards self-determination and economic independence.
It's also important to remember that Indigenous businesses aren't just engines of economic growth. They're also vehicles for cultural preservation and revitalization.
That's a point that's often overlooked, I think, in the economic development conversation. But for many Indigenous entrepreneurs, their businesses are deeply intertwined with their culture and identity.
Exactly. They see their businesses as a way to share their traditions, their stories, their art with the world. It's about keeping their culture alive and thriving.
And that's where the idea of cultural enterprise comes in, right? Business is specifically designed to promote and preserve Indigenous culture.
Exactly. Think traditional arts and crafts, language revitalization storytelling, or ecotourism that showcases Indigenous knowledge of the land. These businesses create both economic and cultural value.
They're strengthening communities, reaffirming Indigenous identity, and challenging the misconception that Indigenous culture is fading away.
Yeah, they're living proof that Indigenous culture is alive, it's evolving, and it has a vital role to play in shaping the future of Australia.
This discussion has been so eye-opening.
It's a fascinating topic.
We've really dug deep into the complexities of Indigenous businesses. From the economic aspects to the cultural and political factors at play.
We've seen that supporting Indigenous businesses isn't just about closing the gap. It's about recognizing the inherent strength and resilience of these communities and empowering them to thrive on their own terms.
We've talked about the importance of genuine partnerships. Culturally sensitive approaches. And the power of these businesses as vehicles for cultural revitalization and economic empowerment.
In our final part, let's bring it all to life with some inspiring examples of Indigenous businesses that are succeeding and discuss what the future holds for this dynamic and growing sector.
So we've talked about all the challenges and opportunities, but I'm ready for some inspiration. Can we dive into some real world examples of success stories?
Absolutely. Remember that incredible joint venture we talked about?
Oh, yeah.
The Larakia Development Corporation partnering with Energy.
Yeah, the solar energy project.
Yes.
Tell me more about that one.
Well, they're not just generating clean energy.
Right.
They're ensuring that both the financial and social benefits flow directly back to the Larakia community.
Okay.
Over 200 Larakia people hold shares in the business.
Wow.
Which means income and a real sense of ownership.
Right.
Plus, the project is creating jobs and training opportunities for Indigenous folks in the region.
It's like a triple win.
It is.
Clean energy, economic empowerment, and community development.
Exactly.
And it really challenges that old idea
Yeah.
that Indigenous communities have to choose between economic progress
Right.
and preserving their culture.
That's the beauty of it. This partnership shows you can have both. It also highlights how Indigenous businesses can be leaders in sustainable development, you know, drawing on their deep connection to the land and their values of environmental respect.
All right, I'm feeling inspired. Hit me with another success story.
Okay, how about an Indigenous fashion label that's making waves globally, Clothing the Gap?
Oh, yeah, I love their stuff.
It's an Aboriginal-owned and led social enterprise. Using fashion to celebrate their culture and advocate for social change.
They even collaborated with a major athletic wear brand, right?
They did.
Super cool designs.
Yeah.
And I know they're about way more than just trendy clothes.
Right. They reinvest their profits into community programs, focusing on health education and employment.
So it's like they've built this incredible platform to elevate Indigenous voices and create positive change through fashion.
And they're doing it in a way that's engaging, stylish, and reaches such a broad audience.
It's amazing to see them challenging stereotypes and fostering a sense of pride in Aboriginal identity.
What's so exciting is that these are just two examples of the incredible diversity within the Indigenous business sector.
From renewable energy to fashion to tourism, everything in between.
That's amazing.
There's so much innovation and creativity happening.
Absolutely.
And as more people realize the incredible products and services that these businesses offer, I think the demand is only going to grow.
For sure.
That's where organizations like Supply Nation come in.
Exactly. Supply Nation acts as like a connector.
Okay.
Linking Indigenous businesses with procurement opportunities that they might not have had access to before.
So it creates a ripple effect.
It does.
Throughout the entire supply chain.
Throughout the whole economy, making it more inclusive and equitable.
It's not just about checking boxes or meeting quotas.
Right.
It's about recognizing the real value that Indigenous businesses bring.
Their skills, their unique cultural perspectives, their commitment to sustainability, these are all assets.
As we look to the future, it's crucial that we move past this outdated idea that Indigenous businesses need handouts or special treatment. They're not asking for favors. They're asking for a fair shot.
To be judged on their merits. On the quality of their products and services.
And time again, they're proving themselves to be successful. Innovative, resilient entrepreneurs.
They're driving economic growth, creating jobs, building stronger communities.
But that's not to say there aren't still hurdles to overcome.
Right.
Systemic barriers still exist. And some challenges are unique to Indigenous businesses.
Like access to capital, for instance? That's a major barrier.
Right. Traditional lenders might be hesitant to invest in businesses in remote locations or those operating within a cultural context that they don't fully understand.
Which is why organizations like Indigenous Business Australia are so crucial. They offer financial support and mentorship. Specifically designed for Indigenous entrepreneurs.
And there's a growing movement within impact investing. To specifically support Indigenous-led ventures.
Investors are starting to see the potential for both financial and social returns.
It's about looking beyond just profits. And considering the broader impact of where you put your money.
Exactly. As more investors adopt that approach. It'll open up so many new possibilities for Indigenous businesses to access the capital they need to really thrive.
This deep dive has been so insightful.
It has.
We've covered so much ground.
We have.
The history, the challenges, the opportunities, and the sheer resilience of these businesses.
It's really inspiring.
If you had to leave our listener with one key takeaway, what would it be?
It's this: Indigenous businesses aren't just about economic development. They're about reclaiming narratives, fostering cultural pride, and shaping a future where success is defined on their own terms.
It's about recognizing that these businesses are a vital part of the Australian economy.
Absolutely.
And their success benefits everyone.
And the best way to support them? Be an informed consumer. Seek out their products and services. And if you're an investor, consider the impact your choices can have.
Don't just think of it as charity.
Right.
Think of it as an investment in a brighter future.
Exactly.
For all of us.
Yeah.
Because when Indigenous businesses thrive, all of Australia thrives.
Yeah.